Welcome to the Jaros Health Podcast, where we make it easy for you to better serve older adults through our content that informs, community that inspires, and courses that deliver.
Hey all, and welcome to this month's State of the Sniff. So this month's episode is the first of a two-part interview of myself with Sean Hagey, and it's not hard and fast facts, so just a heads up going in, but it is something that I think needs to be addressed in our current climate. I think it's something that you'll get a lot of value from, even though it's a little bit mushier and a little bit softer than what we've been used to. All right, let's dive in.
So, hey, everyone. I want to introduce my guest tonight, Sean Hagey. And Sean, I'm going to give them a little bit of a heads up as to why I reached out to them and why we're discussing soft skills tonight. So I noticed Twitter conversation you were having, and it was kind of with yourself. But what I liked about it was you were basically saying, like, this is open for people who are, like, okay with chaos. And I'm going to be talking about some things that aren't hard and fast science. Which I always appreciate a good conversation that's not hard and fast science as much as I love the research and the data. And it was about how our patients would benefit from our interventions if we understood them a little bit better. It was more about, like, if we used our skills, the soft skills to understand people, would interventions benefit them more? Kind of was almost like therapist personality or therapist understanding. Yeah. Like what was going on. So I was really interested in that and the whole idea of that, especially because I know that you kind of feel the same. Twitter is kind of a weird place for me. It's like I go on there to, get information and interact with a therapist and see what else is going on in the world. And I sometimes get caught up in this, like, anger spiral where, like, I'm reading things people have written and I'm like, why are they fighting over this? And then I'm, like, irrationally angry. And then invariably, like, things that aren't PT related creep in. It's like nobody on Twitter has the skills to read anybody because, like, we're not actually talking. Like, we're trying to have conversations, but we're lacking in tone and we're lacking in eye contact and we're lacking in, like, so many other things that just make conversation harder than I feel like make like interacting with the people harder. So the fact that you were like, no, I'm okay with messiness. I think we should kind of embrace it and, like, talk about it. But at the same time, you had, like, the boundary of, like, if you want to argue with me, like, I'm not interested in that. And I was like, I definitely need to talk about this more because this is a really interesting thought process.
Twitter is and social media in general, it's a medium. You always have to, when you're talking about communication, you have to consider the medium. And it's a medium where you can learn a lot of stuff, you can share information, but it's a brutal place to have nuanced discussion. I'd rather kind of talk with people, learn about where they're coming from and their mindset behind it. And that's just, it's tricky to navigate all those things. Like you said, when you have a conversation with somebody, you can look into their eyes and you can kind of read their body language and you can see if they're getting emotional about a topic, and you can know to back off a little bit. Like, oh, I can tell that they perceive that away. And, I'm coming across stronger than I thought, and be able to modify your message. And Twitter and Facebook and all those social media, just you don't even have that option. And so things, like you said, just can spiral rapidly. And I'm getting better. I still get in that spiral myself, but it's about trying to, like I like to embrace the messiness, and I'm okay with not having it all figured out and all the boxes marked off.
Yeah. Now I'm going to give the listeners a little bit of some background. The big 5 personality traits are openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. That's it. That's 5. And yeah, I just thought it was funny when you're saying, like, low in agreeableism. Like, I find myself to be open to new experiences and agreeable. And I think some of that, and like all this okay with messiness, I think also comes from, because where this started, this conversation was a book you were reading. It's called Supernormal by Meg J, PhD. And it's called The Secret World of the Family Hero. And it's basically, as I describe it to my coworkers, it's about people who should be way more messed up than they are, which is kind of how I summed it up. And is, just the people who've had life experiences, particularly as children, who that impacted them. And they're the people who you're like, I don't understand how they're so functional. Like they almost seem perfect. And I found this book fascinating. And then I also found our conversation and going back to my agreeableness and my openness to new experience. As I told you earlier, I have ADHD. My brain is always looking for something to alight on and land on. And I find that I have a very wide pool of interests, not always the deepest. There's a lot of things that I know a little bit about. And sometimes when I try to dive deeper into things, my brain's nope, this is boring. We've done this, move on. So I think the mess kind of draws me because that's what my brain likes. It thrives on a little bit of chaos and a little bit of mess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's one of the things about personality that I think we should embrace. I think we should realize as therapists, okay, how does my personality set me up for either success or failure? And then put yourself in settings and situations and work with patient populations that can enhance that. And that's kind of part of what that Twitter thread was about, is I wonder, based on the therapist and on the patient's personality, if you think about it, openness, agreeableness, conscientiousness, neuroticism, how that can affect treatment and treatment outcomes. If patients aren't very open to experience, are they probably more likely to fail physical therapy or other treatment interventions? I mean, it's likely. We've never done that kind of research. If they're not agreeable and they're highly neurotic, nothing probably works for them. They've already mentally decided that things aren't going to work for them. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me to as someone who is very introverted, which might surprise some people unless they actually know me on a personal level. Super neurotic. I mean, I'm the poster boy for anxiety, depression, and ADD. I'm trying to check off all these nice lists. I'm collecting mental health diagnoses. It's not all it's cracked up to be. But learning that this is where I am, and some of it I can change, and some of it I can be resilient in, like many of these people. But some of it I just need to embrace. And that's really, really hard for a lot of people, is being okay with who I am. And then even using those strengths and weaknesses to connect with patients, because not only are we not perfect, our patients aren't perfect either. Mm-hmm. And it's broken and it's messy, and relationships are always awkward, and it can be very frustrating, or it can give you a lot of life. And that's honestly the thing I love most about patient care, is just talking with patients and connecting with them. I never thought of myself as very technically skilled. At least that part of it never really interested me as much as the connection part. I always felt like if I could make my patients laugh or get them to like me, then that was the hard part, and the rest kind of came with it. I don't know how much of that's therapeutic alliance, but I always felt like if my patients liked me and trusted me, then they bought in, and they would be, more compliant with whatever it is, their diet or their lifestyle, or more motivated. Or I always felt like that was my secret superpower, is to find that little motivation switch and flick it on for them. Especially in home health. When you think about motivational interviewing and all those techniques, I didn't really know any of those, but I just knew what it was like to be a person who was maybe sick or scared or feeling broken or hopeless. And being able to kind of encourage people that way and connect with people.
Yeah. I always, I thought that whole thing about, I would love to see the research on like what the personality traits look like as therapy patients and like how they respond to different things. But it's not going to be me. Like, no way.
Or me.
Yeah, no, Sean and I are not doing it, guys. We'll talk about it later with you. But it's funny that you said about like your superpower was like always like finding that motivation switch. We met at CSM, and like I am not a very physically imposing person. Like I am small. I'm physically small, and I kind of have like a high voice. And
me too.
You are taller than me, though. You do win there. I always felt like my superpower was that I could fly under the radar. There are things that once I understood, like how people perceived me on a first impression. And so I use that non-intimidating, letting you all into my secrets. I use that non-intimidating to build that therapeutic alliance and then convince people to do scary, painful things. Like, and I always felt like that is a big part of, like, especially being in the SNF, like that's where I am. And I tell my students this all the time. I'm like, you can come in knowing like everything that you know, but if that patient is not going to move, they're not going to move, like for whatever reason, like you're getting people who are just out of the hospital. You're getting people who are in pain. You're getting people who are really sick, and you're telling them, we got to do some really uncomfortable stuff. Yay, let's go. Like a lot of them are just, I know personally, I'd be like, you can just F right off. And then also like as part of our conversation, like about other things prior, like I told you, like I had a really not good relationship in high school. And so if someone comes in like super authoritative with me, again, my brain is like, you are not safe. Like I am not safe. I need to get out of this. I'll do what I have to get you away from me. And then like, I'm not coming back, Yeah. So I take those experiences and I think, I don't know how this person approaches authority. I don't know like what their life circumstances are. We're just meeting. I need them to talk to me and I need them to trust me. Like you said, like I have to find that motivation switch. I love that. I know that I come in and I am physically small and I can be quiet, even though people who know me in person know that I'm not naturally the quietest, but I can be. I can adjust that in order to get in and build that trust so that when I'm like, okay, now we're going to do a really painful thing, people do it. And if they're not listening to me, I can also be like, hey, listen to me now. And they're like, oh, whoa. She was like all quiet and mild-mannered. Like I can figure out where to put that in. And that comes down to, let's give them another definition. Do you have it on you? The definition of, we're talking about soft skills. And that is our topic today. And Sean, do you want to read that for them? What are the soft skills?
Desirable qualities for certain forms of employment that do not depend on acquired knowledge. They include common sense, the ability to deal with people, and a positive, flexible attitude.
I feel like that is clinical life. Like, yes, you have to have the acquired knowledge. We're all busting our butts at school for a reason. We all want to be competent when we're in there. And you do want to make sure the things that you're doing with people are clinically appropriate. But at the same time, like you need a positive, flexible attitude, because if you come in grumpy, like no one wants that when they're in pain. Like no one's going to work with you. And the ability to deal with people, like my department is 18 therapists and plus all the patients, plus the nursing staff, so on any given day, I'm working with the nurse managers, the social workers, the case managers, the patients themselves, the family members, the other therapists of all the other disciplines. I have an OT and speech therapist that I'm usually working with. It's a lot of personality. It's a lot of people. And you're kind of juggling all of these relationships and all of this to try to make it work. I have seen people, though, who don't seem to think that that's important. And I don't understand why. And I don't understand, is it something, and I mean, you probably can't answer this either. I don't know how long you've been out of school, but I wonder, like, I try to think back, like, what were we taught in school? What were we aimed for? What was some of the focuses? Like, did people tell us, like, you need to understand, like, how to do this? Or is it just something that I've just done?
That's a great question. Like, I'd say a majority of school and practice and getting ready for licensure is about a test. It's just about, what do you know? How can we objectively test what you know? And there's not a great way to objectively test for empathy. There's not a great way to objectively test for common sense, or how to deal with an upset patient, or, managing, coworkers and bosses. That's, the focus of school is on safety and making sure we don't kill our patients, and meeting, certain minimums, thresholds of competency. But the life part, the human factor part is easy to overlook for people, because you can't measure it and quantify it. And so that you don't have Con Ed classes on it. You have Con Ed classes on techniques and the hard skills. It's easy to overlook just human communication and just being a kind person and empathy.
And you know what, now that I'm thinking back, and I've discussed this with other therapists too, particularly my coworkers, actually most of the people in my department, we all know someone who's failed a clinical because they just couldn't take the skills of a therapist and make it actually work. And that's probably the best way to sum it up. It wasn't that they were like clinically like skill incompetent, but they couldn't put the skill together. They would test great. They couldn't put the skill together with like the human portion of it.
I think there's a lot of therapists who like graduate and then basically fail at being a therapist because they're not adaptable, and they're full of hubris and ego, and life comes at you fast, bro. And I think the joke is, because I know a guy who's a researcher, is like, a lot of failed therapists end up as researchers or academics because they didn't have the personality skills that could, and that's a joke, and only a researcher can tell that joke. So apologies to anybody who's hearing that from me. But as a guitar player, it's like the real rock stars are Jimi Hendrix, and then the wannabes like me, who just play on the, for fun. We teach people.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to think about. With knowledge is a really important thing, and you have to have certain hard skills. But are those actually the easiest skills to teach? Once you get somebody who has the soft skills mastered, I'm of the opinion that person can do just about damn anything, because you can teach hard skills. The soft skills can be really hard to learn for people, especially if you really suck at it, in one area. Like it's easy to study for an exam, relatively speaking, than to be others centered instead of self-centered. That's a really hard lesson that you can't pull off in a week.
Have you tried to teach people? I know, like you said, you've been a CI. Have you like actively tried to teach people the soft skills, or how have you gone about it?
Not looking back, not in a formal way, but I get a kick out of the grumpy patients. Like I was just, mentioning early about humor. You said what your go-to is being kind of the quiet and then selectively asserting yourself. I usually get people's guards down by self-deprecating humor. I don't mind making fun of myself for being short or being a furry dude or being goofy looking, and that usually makes them laugh. Humor is a great quote. Is humor is hostile, and usually a joke is made at someone's expense. So if I can make the joke at my expense, I don't care, and that lightens the mood, and a little bit of levity can go a long way. And they see that I don't take myself too seriously, and I'm not some taskmaster kind of, because that's not me. I'm like you with the authoritarian thing. If somebody comes at me with this, you have to do this authoritarian mindset, like I'm out. Bye, peace. That's an immediate turnoff. And so, some patients need that. And part of being good at soft skills is knowing like like a good coach, if you want to talk about an athletic comparison, knowing what motivates certain people you have to get in their face a little bit. And with certain students that I could tell that are more introverted by nature, I'd really prod them to challenge themselves to be more assertive and to speak up more and have a little bit more confidence in themselves. And so for some of those that are a little too quick to talk, say, try and hold that thought and let them run with it, because the patient might talk themselves into where you're going anyway. And if you jump in it too early, you could disrupt the flow. And just, I wish I had been more focused and aware of those things. But I guess that's usually what my attempts at teaching those things have been.
Mm-hmm. It took me a while to realize that other people didn't understand this as easily. I realized that some people weren't good at it, but to actually realize that some people didn't understand how to do it, that kind of took me a minute. And so when I have students now, I think of things that they may not know, socially, social customs they may not understand, or things about history they may not understand, or things about the patients they may not understand. And I try to tell them, just realize not everyone's coming from your perspective. So I want you to, introduce yourself, say what you're doing, but give them space to have a reaction. Like you said, don't be so quick to talk. Give them a little bit of space, because they're probably going to get where you are. I mean, sometimes you have to along, but I think especially because of the setting that I'm in, so being in the skilled nursing, there's just so much going on. There's so many people who are coming from a place where they don't have power. They've lost it, along the way from being in the hospital. I have 2 kids, right? And one of them, I had a C-section, and there is something, even with that surgery, there's something very humbling about not being able to take care of yourself, even for a brief period of time, and to have people approach you more with kindness than this is what you have to do, was always helpful. I had those boots on for 2 days. So I couldn't even stand up, and they weren't you have to do this. They were look, you can't hold the baby when you're standing up because you're going to fall over. But they were good about the way they approached me with things. And it was very humbling to come from a place where I'm perfectly fine and I'm very healthy. And then I have a fall risk bracelet on, and I'm laughing and taking pictures and showing my friends. And then I realize I can't feel my legs. It's been a day. I still can't feel my legs. And this is ridiculous. I am a fall risk, and I am at the mercy of other people, and I do need help. And these people have been there for so much longer sometimes than I have. They are coming from a place of powerlessness, and that's something that you have to be respectful of. And I thought that was interesting when I was reading the book. There was a quote, I'm not going to get it right, but it was something along the lines of the powerful smile because they want to, the powerless smile because they have to. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. People are going to react how they have to survive. And if you can understand where your power is in the situation, who's the powerful one in the situation, I feel if we think about it, lots of times in therapy, we are the powerful one in that situation. So you have to be able to look at the other person and see where they're at. So I rambled.
And tying it back into that book as well, I think when you talk about your the supernormal abilities, one of the most powerful points of the book to me was that children of addicts have an incredible perceptive ability because it's a survival mechanism. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to identify when that person comes into the room, what state they're in, and what you need to do to negotiate it. From an age that's way too young to have to be an adult. And part of that is really traumatic, but part of that skill that's learned at a young age can be used for good, mm-hmm. like this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of what resilience looks like. I think that it helps me with my empathy to know that I've been in some pretty terrible situations that felt pretty hopeless. And I can sit across from a patient and give them a look, and they can see in my eyes that when I'm asking how you're doing, like I'm actually asking how you're doing. I don't just do the, hey, how you doing? I'll sit down and I'll go, hey, you've got a lot on your plate right now. How are you holding up with all this?
Yeah.
And once they see that you care, it starts falling out of them, because I know that that's what I want in that situation, is somebody to be willing to listen non-judgmentally and understand, and not be, quick to judge and quick to, oh, you said this wrong, or, like, no, whatever you say is okay. Yeah. We're humans here,
Like, I'm going to tell a very vague version of this story because it's not my story to tell, but I had an outpatient, and I set him up to do something, and I wasn't really thinking about what I was doing. And I put him in between two mats, right? Because you think about the way the gyms are set up normally in outpatient, like you get those plinths all next to each other. So I had him in between them with his back to the wall. And then, so he's in between two, back to the wall, and I'm in front of him. We would talk and everything before, and I can see, like, I'm looking at him and I see his eyes start to get wider, and I can almost feel his breath pick up, and I'm like, what is going on with you right now? I'm like, are you okay? Like, something's going on. Like, what's going on with you right now? And he just looked at me and he's like, I'm really trying not to just toss you out of the way and run. He's like, because I'm having a panic attack. He's like, I'm having some war flashbacks, and I don't like the feeling that I'm trapped right now. And I'm really trying to remind myself that I am not there anymore. And I was like, okay. I didn't think anything of it, but am I far more aware of how I position people now? Yes. Do I let people know? Do I try to figure out, all right, we've spoken, I give people a physical out, I give people space to have a physical out. If I have to put them in a space where they're kind of confined, I'll tell people, I'm like, we're going to work over here. Are you cool with that? And I try to give people that. Sometimes you can't give people an out. Sometimes you just have to use a Hoyer, or you have to use the Easy Stand, or some kind of, machine that is containing. But I try to give people the space to physically have space now. It's something that I'm very aware of, because I'm sure, I know that it's not just people who've been in war who've experienced feelings of being trapped and contained in a situation they have no control of.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you learn and you apply. And I think that's one of the things about the soft skills is they build, even if you come into it not understanding how things work, you can always build on that. Yeah. You can always add another layer to your understanding of okay, some people function like this. I should just be aware of it. And having that relationship coming into every session, they said, finding the motivation, building a therapeutic alliance, that gives people more room to trust you, but they'll talk to you more. You'll hear the stories and you'll know why maybe a technique you're using isn't working. Maybe there's some reason that they are actually resisting what you're trying to do. Even if you think that your technique is the best ever, or all the research shows this, for some people, it doesn't work. Oh God, where did I read it? A while back. And it said some people are going to do really well with the hard and fast, forward charging option, you can go super intense on their therapy and they're going to respond well to that. And some people, you're just going to have to go slow and steady and they're going to respond to that. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind too. We know intensity is good and that's all what we're hearing right now, but maybe not for everybody.
Well, and it's also being aware that patients will sometimes just tell you what you want to hear. And that's kind of the fun thing about being a PTA, is I will sometimes spend a lot of time with patients that the PT won't. And we'll say, how's the home exercise is going? Are you, and then I'll stop and I'll look at them and I'll go, no, really, are you actually doing your exercises?
Thank you for listening to the Jaros Health Podcast. Go to jaroshealth.com to get the show notes for this episode and find out how you can join the Jaros community for free. You'll get access to our private Facebook group and the weekly Jaros recap, where we share our favorite reads, podcasts, and any interesting conversations in the Jaros community that week. Once again, that's GEROS health.com. Thanks for listening.